What's up, people? It's James from Lucrative MMA, and I'm back for another edition of the Lucrative MMA Betting Podcast. This is the third episode, and by far the episode I've been looking forward to. This is a huge card. We have UFC 259. I'm pumped up for this card. I'm hyped up for this card. I'm passionate about this card. It's one of the best cards I've ever seen in UFC history. A lot of people are saying that this is the best card of the year. I guess they're predicting it to be the best card of the year because obviously we're only in March. You can't say that yet. But I'm actually going out maybe on a little bit of a limb and saying that this is probably one of the best cards, top to bottom, if you're talking about depth, that the UFC has ever put on in its history. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but anyone watching live, you can let me know in the comments if you think I'm being a little bit too enthusiastic, but I really do believe this is probably up there with one of the best cards they've ever put on in UFC history. So my boy from Twitter, AJ Shulo, put out a post yesterday saying that when you're excited, when you're passionate about a card, if you're making content, make it as soon as you're feeling passionate. And I'm feeling real passionate. So without further ado, we will get into the podcast and we will get into breaking down the card. Now, as most of you will know, obviously, if you're new listeners, you won't know, but you can kind of tell by the name of the podcast. This is a betting podcast, so I will be talking about these fights from a betting angle. I won't be talking about them necessarily only from a stylistic or a statistic point of view. I will be taking into account the odds. And we're trying to make money off this at the end of the day, right? So it's not all about who you think's going to win. It's also about where you find value on the line. So if you have been listening to this podcast for the first two episodes, you will know how it goes. Basically, what I do is I talk about the most exciting fight on the card. And that's been very hard for me to decide, but I have decided. And then I talk about the most inaccurate betting line on the card. That was also pretty hard for me to decide. I think a lot of the fights, a lot of the bets, the prop bets and the straight bets are lined fairly accurately on this card, especially as I'm making this on Friday. This podcast is actually Saturday where I am, but most of the world's still in Friday. So, it's only 1 day, 2 days before the fight. So a lot of the lines that were inaccurate have been steamed and now they are fairly accurate. I did jump in on some early-ish lines. Me and my members got some solid lines before, and them lines, one line in specific I'm talking about, has been steamed. But I have managed to get a line I think is pretty inaccurate, so I will give you guys that. And then we'll also be talking about the main event. And for reasons you'll find out later, I'm probably going to talk about the co-main as well. So let's get into it. The most exciting fight on the card. Now, this, as I said, took me a long time to decide because this card, it's a banger of a card, man. There's about 15 fights on this card, and you've got to say at least 4 or 5 of them were in the running to be the best fight on the card, in my opinion, or the most exciting fight, right? It just depends what you like, I guess. Some people like knockouts. Everyone likes a knockout, but some people like heavy hitters. So, a lot of people saying Blachowicz versus Adesanya is probably the most exciting fight on the card, especially as Adesanya's moving up in weight. That's very attractive to a lot of people. But if you're like me, I actually, I like the lighter weight classes. So my favorite weight class in the UFC is flyweight. And we've got solid flyweight fights on this card. We've got like 3 really exciting flyweight fights on this card. But the most exciting fight, the one I'm going to go for, is not a flyweight fight. It's actually a bantamweight fight. And most of you will probably know what I'm talking about. There is a couple good bantamweight fights on this card. We've got Dominic Cruz taking on Casey Kenny. That's definitely going to be a very solid fight. We've got Kyler Phillips taking on Yadong Song. That is going to be an absolute banger. I do want to talk a little bit about that fight. It's not the most exciting fight that I'm going to be talking about, but I did want to give it a little bit of shine because this Kyler Phillips versus Yadong Song fight is going to be an absolute banger, guys. Kyler Phillips is 8-1. Yadong Song, I haven't got his record up here, but he's 23 years old apparently, and he's already taken out the likes of Marlon Vera, the likes of Cody Stamann. When I say taken out, he's won by decision, but you know what I mean. I mean, he's won. So the kid's 23 years old and he's holding wins over Piotr Yan and Cody Stamann. That is nothing to be ashamed of. That is very, very applause worthy, because them two fighters are hard out for anyone. We've seen Piotr Yan kind of rise to fame after his win over Sean O'Malley. And I guess he did fairly well in the Aldo fight. Aldo is an elite level fighter. And for Yodong Song to go out there and beat them two, that really put his name on the map, got him respected by a lot of MMA fans like myself. And, I was already pretty high on him, and I actually bet on him against Cody Stamann. And I bet on him against Marlon Piotr. And I believe both of them were correct decisions. They were definitely close fights. But as we know, 2021, 2020, 2019, last couple of years, anytime there's a fight which is close, apparently it's a robbery, like every single time. So I don't think it was a robbery. Obviously, I had bets on the line. So maybe I'm a little bit biased there. But basically, Yodong Song is an absolute terrifying fighter. He can knock you out at any point. And Kyler Phillips is a beast as well, man. Kyler Phillips throws some crazy attacks. He'll throw spinning back elbows, spinning back fists. He throws a lot of spinning back capoeira kicks. He also mixes his takedowns in really well. I just think that fight's going to be an absolute banger. But without further ado, the most exciting fight that I have picked on this card is Piotr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling. This fight is an absolute banger. Now, let's talk about this fight, because this has got the MMA community divided. I saw a post earlier on Twitter by Technical Tim, and he said that, this fight has got the community divided. Everyone has very strong stances on each side, and each side is not really budging. Like most of the people I see who have a stance on a certain side, they're not budging. They're like, look, my guy's gonna win. You guys, speaking about the other fighters' side, quote unquote, you don't know what you're talking about. You're gonna lose. And to be honest, like a lot of times in life, I'm right down the middle on this one. So I'm definitely not picking a side per se. I think it's going to be a really close fight, and I'll tell you why. We'll get into the stylistics of this fight. So as you guys know, Piotr Yan is an absolute beast. I think he had multiple amateur boxing fights before he transitioned into MMA. And you can tell, the way he fights, you can tell he's a boxer. It's not hard to realize he's a boxer. Obviously, he's a full-fledged MMA fighter now. I remember him dropping Jimmy Rivera with a head kick, or was that John Dodson? Believe it was Jimmy Rivera. He dropped him with a head kick and he fell back at the same time. He knocked out Uriah Faber with a head kick. It was more like a head boot. He just kind of stuck his leg up there and ended up booting the face off Uriah Faber. That was a very systematic, 3-round systematic beatdown of Uriah Faber. It's kind of hard to watch, to be honest. But, Yan is obviously a full-fledged MMA fighter, but the boxing is his specialty, right? So what he does like to do in his fights is corral his opponents up against the cage, land huge, heavy shots. And what he'll do is he'll take a shot to receive a shot. He doesn't mind getting hit. In fact, he kind of eggs it on. You'll see a lot of time he'll get hit. And what he does, he's holding his hands up in a boxing stance, and he'll just turn his fingers and beckon the fighters on, like doing the come here motion, when he's getting hit. So he's an animal. He doesn't mind getting hit. He's from Russia. Them guys over there are built different. And it seems like we say that about a lot of different nationalities, right? Especially these days. So with the Nigerians in the UFC, right? They're built different, right? You got Ngannou, you got Kamaru Usman, you've got Sodiq Yusuff. And then obviously the Russians, the Dagestanis, you've got Khabib, Islam, Zabit, all of them guys. And then, in boxing, you've got all the Cubans, they're built differently. So it does seem like we do that with a lot of different, and then now it's the Georgians in MMA. The Georgians are built differently. But there are a few spots in the world where it just seems like people are built a bit differently, man, and you get beasts from all over the world, right? How many American beasts do we have? Do you know what I mean? But yeah, it does seem like in Russia, they are built a little bit different. Even if it's not in the fighting style, it's kind of just the personality. You know, Piotr Yan is very, very calm. He never seems to get angry, never seems to get riled up. He looks you dead in the eye and basically tells you, I'm going to break you, you know. In fact, it was actually Aljo saying he was going to break Piotr Yan when it came to the weigh-ins yesterday. But back to the stylistics of this matchup. So, yeah, Piotr Yan's a boxer. He likes to push you against the cage and land heavy shots, basically, you know. That's his game. His game is the counter game, but make no mistake about it, he is not only a counter striker. He will definitely lead, and he leads often. He leads the dance, but he is always trying to look for that counter shot. So he's trying to lead to make you lead to counter your lead, if you understand. So, for example, Piotr Yan will have a fighter up against the cage, right? And he'll be leading. But it's not necessarily because he wants to knock you out with that lead punch. What he wants to do is draw shots out of you with the pressure and the pace he puts on you. So when he does draw them shots out, then he can counter them. So he is leading technically, but he's kind of waiting for you to strike before he puts it on you. Yeah, Piotr Yan, he's a very solid fighter. I will say, though, that Piotr Yan, he hasn't faced lots and lots of top-level competition in his career, especially in the UFC. You know, we know he fought Magomedov outside of the UFC, who's a very high-level fighter. But, you know, compared to Aljo, I will say that Aljo's definitely had the harder run of it in the UFC. He's definitely fought the higher-level fighters. And this is a real bantamweight title fight. For example, Piotr Yan, when he got the title fight, he fought Uriah Faber before that, right? So when he knocked out Uriah Faber, then he got given a title fight against Jose Aldo, who was actually 0-1 in the division. So, I mean, no matter what way you slice and dice it, that's not a hard run to the UFC title, right? He fought John Dodson. At that point, John Dodson, you know, he was on the tail end of his career. I know he had, I don't know if you want to call it resurgence. He beat Nathaniel Wood out last time, which was a good win. But, you know, John Dodson is not like super high level, especially after that Mighty Mouse rematch he had. Like, he kind of just started dwindling after that. So he beat Piotr Yan, beat John Dodson. He beat Jimmy Rivera, which was a good win. But then he beat Uriah Faber and he got a title shot. So it's not very a hard run for the title. And if you look at Aljamain Sterling, he's had a much harder run. You know, he fought, going back to 2017, he fought Renan Barão. I know at that point, Renan Barão is obviously like, you know, on the tail end of his career. But after that, he fought Marlon Moraes, who's an absolute killer. He got knocked out there. Since that fight, he's fought Brett Jones, who's always a tough out for anyone, Brett Jones, you know. Actually, going into that fight, Brett Jones was undefeated at 15-0. So, I mean, that was a hard fight for him. And, you know, he won by decision. Then he fought Cody Stamann. Cody Stamann, you know, he will give you some of them wrestling looks. But it wasn't good for him in that fight because once the grappling started, he managed to get a Sulov stretch against Cody Stamann. And it is actually listed on Typology as a knee bar, but from my memory, I thought that was a Sulov stretch, so I'm not sure about that one. But anyway, he got the second round submission there. Then he fought Jimmy Rivera. He won by decision there, pretty clear decision. He outpointed Jimmy Rivera. Then he fought Pedro Munoz, who's, you know, we just see what he done in the rematch to Jimmy Rivera. So that's another hard fight for Aljo there. But he defeated Pedro Munoz, and he fought him like Pedro Munoz, which was pretty crazy. So to see Aljo doing that, you know, you have to respect it because you wouldn't think that Aljamain would win a dogfight, a back and forth in the pocket fight against Pedro Munoz. Now, I will say that Aljo was fighting in the pocket, then he'd back out, and then he'd jump out, and then he'll move around a bit. But a lot of that fight was contested in the pocket. It wasn't just constant pocket fighting, but Aljo would contest in the pocket, then jump back out, jump back in the pocket, then jump back out. So a lot of that fight was in the pocket, and he basically gave Pedro Munoz, in my opinion, the best chance of winning that fight, and he still won 30-27. That is a solid victory from Aljamain Sterling. Then the UFC put him up against Corey Sandhagen, an absolute murderer of a man. Corey 12-1 at the time, only one loss in his career. And he goes out there and he chokes Corey Sandhagen out in under 90 seconds. Then finally, he gets his chance at the bantamweight title against Piotr Yan. Now, if you're on the flip side, if you look at Piotr Yan's run, which is what I just mentioned, it's a lot easier, right? It just is. So, that's not meaning to say anything. Styles make fights. Just because you've had harder fights in your past does not mean you're going to win a fight when you come up against a certain man. Styles make fights. And we'll get into the styles. I'll talk about Aljo. I've talked about Piotr Yan. You guys know what he does now. And Aljo, on the other hand, he's a lot different, right? So initially, Aljo was more of a submission grappler type fighter, right? Always going for takedowns, always wanted to get to the ground. But in the last, let's say, 3 to 4 years, he's definitely improved his stand-up drastically. And I mean, you only have to look at his record and wiki-cap this fight. Well, in fact, you wouldn't know how the fights go. But if you actually do your tape research and watch the fights, you will know that his striking has improved because he's got decision wins over Jimmy Rivera and Pedro Munoz, two of the higher level strikers in the bantamweight division, and two of the higher level strikers that have stuck around for many, many years in the bantamweight division. So that just shows that they have longevity in the game. They can stay at that top level. And what that means a lot of the time, if someone stayed at the top level, is that they have high level adapting abilities in the cage and out the cage. So for him to stand up for 15 minutes virtually, I know we went for a couple of takedowns against Jimmy Rivera, but for him to win virtually 30 minutes of stand-up against Pedro Munoz in Jimmy Rivera, that just shows you, the level of striker Aljamain has become. And I have to take my hats off to him because, he wasn't once like that. When he first came into the UFC, it was a long time ago. He wasn't like that. So now he's in and out. Aljamain, very different to Piotr Yan. He's in and out on the back foot. He's always moving. He never sits still. He throws a lot of kicks as opposed to Piotr Yan throws a lot of hands. Aljamain will throw head kicks. He will throw that front push kick to the body. He really digs in with that front push kick to the body. He does it, or he did it a lot of times to Pedro Munoz in their fight. Pedro Munoz did it more to him because Pedro Munoz is one of the best in the whole UFC at that front push kick, that front snap kick. But Aljamain definitely has that in his game now. And he also will aim for the chin. So he will, fake to the body, or he will hit the body a couple of times, and then he'll try and throw that front kick to the chin. Also throw head kicks, and he does throw hard leg kicks, especially, it seems, if you're leg kicking him. Because I do remember in the Jimmy Rivera and the Pedro Munoz fights, especially the Munoz fight, when Munoz was landing heavy leg kicks, as Munoz loves to do, we just saw it last weekend against Jimmy Rivera, ironically, Aljo wasn't deterred by it. Aljo would actually come back with his own leg kicks even harder. At one point, they threw about 4 leg kicks apiece at each other. So it was like 8 leg kicks, and they just stood in the pocket, and Pedro would throw one, then Aljo would throw one, Pedro would throw one, Aljo would throw one. And you wouldn't really think that, someone like Aljo would just stand in a pocket and throw leg kicks at Pedro Munoz. So what I'm trying to say is he has a very diverse game. I remember him throwing step-in elbows to Pedro Munoz, which was a thing of beauty, to be honest. He's got a very, very, very diverse striking game. Dare I say more diverse than Piotr Yan? Yeah, I will. I'll say it. A lot more diverse than Piotr Yan. Now, to summarize the striking, though, because it kind of seems like I'm saying Aljo's a better striker, Piotr Yan is a higher level striker than Aljamain Sterling. Make no mistake about it. That's Piotr Yan's bread and bones. He's been striking for a lot longer than Aljamain Sterling, in my opinion. I'm not 100% sure. I guess I could fact check myself. I could go back on, when they started their MMA careers. So the first fight, the amateur fight that Aljamain ever had, this is the amateur fight, right, was in 2009. And then if you go over to Piotr Yan's record and check the first amateur fight that he ever had, it was in 2014. But we know he has been having boxing bouts before that. You can just tell when they're on the feet, guys, that these guys, like my man Z likes to say, they're playing a different game, right? Aljamain is just, he doesn't set things up as well as Piotr Yan. He can't read the striking realm as Piotr Yan. But what he does have on his side is the unorthodoxness of his game, which throws a lot of people off. And especially if you're in a 15-minute fight, that's not that long to get a read or get a beat on someone like Aljamain Sterling. You know, you might be able to get a beat on someone like, you know, like Cody Staman's striking, for example, because it's not super unorthodox. And also, yeah, it's not super unorthodox, right? So you don't need too long to work that out. But against Aljamain Sterling, you're going to need some time to work that out, especially when you're getting hit in the face, right? So 50 minutes is not a long time, but we do have 25 minutes in this fight. So how I see this fight breaking down now, I've told you how Piotr Yan fights. I've told you how Aljo fights. And, you know, one thing I will say, you know, because I've mainly spoke about the striking. One thing I will say is that Aljo is... he's next level on the mat, man. Like submission-wise, not necessarily, you know, controlling and, you know, position, but submission-wise, Aljo is very, very high level. If Aljo gets on anybody's back, the fight definitely can be over. He likes to throw that body triangle in. And Aljo's very long for the weight class, so it helps him in a lot of the submissions he uses. He's able to grab limbs that maybe other people wouldn't be able to reach. And he's able to just use his gangly frame to, you know, just get into better positions on the mat. And, you know, he's got them skinny limbs as well. He's pretty long and skinny. So he's able to like wrap up chokes maybe when other people wouldn't be able to. And he slip into different spaces on the ground and manipulate bodies a little bit better than your average bodied fighter, say like, or, you know, if he was a lot more stocky, say like Jimmy Rivera. So I do give the grappling edge quite some bit, especially the submission grappling edge, not really necessarily the scramble or the, I don't know, the wrestling or the strength in grappling edge, but just the pure submission grappling. I'm definitely going to give that edge to Aljamain Sterling here. Now, will that affect the fight? I'm not so sure Aljamain will be able to get Piotr Yan down. Aljo is not a terribly great wrestler, and we haven't seen Piotr Yan defend too many takedowns, but I have watched his fight with Magomedov back in ACB, his fight and his rematch, and I will say that Piotr Yan is he's got very solid hips. That's what I will say. It's not easy to take him down. And it's hard for me to see Aljo, you know, just consistently taking this guy down. Like, he's not going to do it, guys. Like, I'm pretty sure he's not going to consistently get him down. Now, does he need to consistently get him down to win the fight? Probably not, man. If he gets him down 2-3 times, he definitely is liable to latch up some sort of submission. Now, how I'm going to summarize the fight now. I've given quite a lot of thoughts on the fight. I'm going to summarize how I think this fight goes. So I think it's going to take a while, as I've said, because of his unorthodox striking and just movement. I think it will take a while for Piotr Yan to download his data and to read Aljo. Now, it always takes Piotr Yan quite a bit of time to read his opponent. That's just how he fights. He's a very cerebral fighter. He's very similar to Israel Adesanya in the fact that he takes a while to download your data, but once he's got it, you see he starts landing more and more. Now, there is a combination of the pressure and his opponents a lot of times, you know, maybe mentally doubting themselves or just physically the pressure getting to them. But it is also because he is able to make reads in real time like high-level strikers are able to do. Now, he will get hit a lot more than someone like Adesanya, but just talking about the cerebralness of the fighters and of the striking, it's similar in that regard. So I do feel like in the first 5 to 10 minutes, Aljo will probably be winning this fight. But, you know, when it gets to that end of that second round, you know, once we get past the 7.5 minute mark, I do believe Piotr Yan's going to start to make huge reads on Aljo. And I do see Piotr Yan in this fight at some point, probably the third round, landing a very heavy shot on Aljo. I think Aljo's probably going to slow down a little bit. I know that his cardio has looked good in a lot of his fights, and I'm not saying that, you know, his cardio is bad at all, but we haven't seen him in a 5-round fight before. We have seen Piotr Yan finish a fight in the 5th round before. Now, albeit that was against Jose Aldo, and we know Jose Aldo is a gasser after that 2nd, 3rd round. But at the end of the day, we've seen Yan there. We haven't seen Aljo there. So at the end of the day, no matter what you think, we do have to make assumptions about his cardio late into fights. So when I think about this fight, so it's so hard, man. I mean, you can probably tell me, you can probably tell just by the way I'm talking about it. This fight is super hard to call. I can see this fight going multiple ways. I really can see Aljo getting the back and choking out Piotr Yan. And I really can see Aljo being up 3-0 when we're in the 4th round. So, I mean, maybe he's already won the fight on the scorecards there. But I think the line's fairly accurate on -110 apiece. But I'm going to lean about 55% towards Piotr Yan, because I do feel like the striking is at another level for Piotr Yan, and I do feel like he will begin to make reads in that once we get to the 7th and 8th minute range. And I do believe in the 3rd or 4th round, he will land a huge shot on Aljamain Sterling, and he will possibly win the fight. Now, whether Aljamain will come through that huge shot, I don't know. He may do. And then, it might be a close decision, maybe like a 48-47 decision. But if I'm going to give a prediction on this fight, and I will give a final prediction on this fight, but as I say, I wouldn't be rushing to bet it. I'm not going to bet it. There's not much value for me. But my final prediction will be Piotr Yan to win by 4th round TKO. I'm just going to take a drink of water after that one, because that breakdown was pretty intense. That was like a solid 25-minute breakdown on that fight. So I hope I didn't ramble too much. And we're going to move on with the podcast, guys. We're going to talk about the next concept that I like to talk about, which is the most inaccurate line on the card. Now, as I said before I started this podcast, or on my intro, that this fight, it's pretty hard to, this fight card is pretty hard to break down in regards to the most inaccurate line, because a lot of the lines now are very accurate. There was one line that I bet and I sent to my members about 2 weeks ago. I sent this bet out when the line was stable, by the way. This line actually opened up at quite a high plus money line, but I tipped it to my members when it stabilized at -140. And we put 3.4 units, I believe, on it. So we went quite heavy on this bet because I thought the line was pretty ridiculous. But now that line has actually changed to, I think it's like -230 right now. So, if you're in the MMA betting game, you probably know what fighter I'm talking about. But that was definitely the most inaccurate line on the card. What I'm going to go for, the most inaccurate line on the card that I can see, in my opinion, is Israel Adesanya to win by decision at +275. So I'll tell you exactly why I think this is the most inaccurate line on the card. But first of all, I'll tell you why I think it is from a mathematical perspective, right? Because at the end of the day, we are sports bettors, which means we're bettors, which means that we want to be betting numbers, okay? We don't want to be betting teams, or we don't want to be betting fighters. We want to be betting where there's value on the line, right? In any bet that we make, if we make parlays, if we make prop bets, if we make straight bets, we need to be finding value on the line. So I'll tell you exactly how I come up with value on the line, because a lot of times, especially beginners, you'll hear this concept value, and you'll be like, yeah, well, what does it actually mean? And, there's a lot of questions around value, like, is there value in a losing bet? Is a winning bet always value, and stuff like that? And I guess that's another podcast for another day, and I may address that at some point. But how I came to the conclusion that there was value on this and that this line was pretty inaccurate was, first of all, what I did was I capped the fight between Israel Adesanya and Jan Blachowicz. I capped each fighter's winning probability. So after extensive research, taking everything into account, not just the stylistics of the fight, but also taking into account the huge weight difference that there will be in the on the fight on the night. Also taking into account the cage size, which is obviously a smaller cage because we're in the UFC Apex. Taking into account everything, past injuries if they've fight before, and then obviously king tape, which is which should be taking up 85 to 90% of your, or which should be adding 85 or 90% to your final capping probability, right? All that other stuff I mentioned, like weight, size, age, that stuff's like 10 to 15% in my opinion. The stylistics of the matchup are huge. Now, there is a little caveat to that, and I have to give caveats because, you know, this is advice I'm giving out basically, is that each fight is different, and there are some fights where the age, the reach, the weight actually has more than a, 10 to 15% effect on the fight. But, most of the time, when you got fighters that are the same size or, similar size in the same weight class, then, you want to be looking at tape and you want to be basically basing your bet around that, right? So this is a bit different though, because Israel Adesanya is moving up 20 pounds, which is virtually the heaviest weight jump you can move up, I guess, apart from light heavyweight to heavyweight. But, you do get heavyweights that are 220 sometimes. So, Izzy's going to be moving up 20 pounds here, which is super heavy. And basically, this is how I break down the fight. So I think I'm giving Israel Adesanya about 70% chance of winning this fight, right? And out of that, so if I just type in my calculator here now, 70%, right? That means he should be lined, in my opinion, at minus 233. I think he's lined at about minus 225 right now. So I'm basically capping it exactly where the line currently is, right? So that means that, in my opinion, there's no value on this line, right? There's like a 1% value or something, because I'm saying should be minus 233, but it's in fact minus 225. So, that's like a 1% value on the line. 1% does not warrant enough for a bet. So I'm not going to be betting anyone's money line. But what I did was I looked into the prop bets, right? And I said that if Israel Adesanya wins this fight 70% of the time, I said at least half of them times he wins by decision, and at least half of them times he wins by stoppage. So if we half 70%, what do we get? We get 35%, of course, right? So basically, I'm saying that 35% of the time this fight happens, Israel will win by decision. And then 35% of the time this fight happens, Israel will win by KO. Now, if I just type in my probability calculator here, the implied win percentage of 35%, that means that the betting line, the money line, should be plus 187. But if you actually go on your sportsbook now and you check Israel Adesanya via decision, you will see that he's currently sitting at plus 275. So if I type in plus 275 on my probability calculator, the implied win percentage of that is 26%. So I'm saying it will happen 35% of the time, but the bookies have it listed on their website as happening only 26% of the time. That means, in my opinion, there's a 9% edge on this bet, which means there's value, right? Anytime you have any percent on the bet, that is value. Now, the caveat to this is that you need to be capping fights correctly in order for this to work, right? Because if you're not capping fights correctly, all of this percentage and value bullshit makes no difference, okay? And unfortunately, 95% of the population, the betting population, do not cap fights correctly. So anyway, back to the bet. I think that we're getting about a 9% edge on this bet, so I have to bet it. Now, let me just tell you guys that I'm saying this is only happening 35% of the time, right? So what I'm actually saying is that more often than not, this is not going to happen. What I'm betting on, what I'm putting my money on to happen, what I'm going to be cheering to happen, I am myself saying it's probably not going to happen, because anything over 50% is probably not going to happen, right? Because probably means more than likely. So it's actually less than likely this is going to happen if I think it's going to happen 35% of the time. But because the line is off, in my opinion, that's why I'm taking a shot on it. So I'm not actually betting on something I quote unquote think is going to happen. I'm betting on something because I think I'm getting an edge on the bookies. Now, if you do this correctly, cap correctly over the year, you will come out in profit. So why do I think Israel Adesanya has a 35% chance of winning this fight by decision? So stylistically, Izzy, as I said before in the previous breakdown for Piotr Yan, he's a very cerebral fighter. So he's going to stay on the back foot for at least the first couple of rounds and basically download the data of his opponents, movements, striking, game plan, all of that stuff, right? He's a very clever fighter, probably one of the most high-level striking brains we have ever seen in the octagon. And I would probably go as far as to say he is the best striker we've ever had in the UFC. I really class Stephen Thompson as a very high-level striker, but it's close. Israel Adesanya is a very high-level striker, and I think the first couple of rounds is going to be a very quote-unquote boring fight. Now, I'm never bored because I'll be on the edge of my seat because I know that crack from any one of them could end the fight, right? But just in terms of like strikes landed, strikes thrown, I don't think it's going to be a very entertaining matchup. I do think the first 10 minutes are going to be very... both fighters are probably going to be on the back foot, right? So, in my opinion, we're already knocking out 10 minutes of the fight. Now, of course, a knockout can come within the first 2 rounds, but I think it's unlikely. So, or in my opinion, we're already knocking out 10 minutes of that fight, right? So we've only got 15 minutes to go. And, you know, a lot of people I've spoke to, I did a podcast, or I just did a little breakdown of this fight with my boy Z on his YouTube channel, Z's MMA, yesterday. And, you know, he was basically saying that he thinks Adesanya is gonna stop this fight. And what he was saying is that the reason he thinks that is because he thinks Yan at some point is going to rush him, right? Because Yan is known to blitz in. But I don't just think one blitz from Yan is going to mean the fight's over, right? Like, I don't think so. I mean, obviously it could do, but it's unlikely that the first time Yan blitzes in, Izzy's going to knock him out, in my opinion, right? I think, in fact, the first time Yan blitzes in, Izzy's going to be getting the fuck out of the way. He's not going to want to counter Yan. Obviously, he wants to, but he's going to get out of the way, man, because, yeah, all right, Yan does blitz in, but let me tell you something. If Yan blitzes in, he's dangerous, you know, like he's dangerous when he blitzes in. He blitzed in on Dominic Reyes a lot of times, and he caught Dominic Reyes. So just because Yan blitzes in, it doesn't mean that's an automatic KO from Izzy, you know. And it's not just a narrative, you know, it's a narrative I've heard from a lot of people. You know, Yan is, he's clumsy when he blitzes in. But the thing about that is, I think he's going to respect Izzy striking more than he respects a couple of other people striking. And to be honest, after that Thiago Santos knockout that Jan Blachowicz took a few years back when he rushed in, I haven't seen him rush in as much ever again. I just haven't seen it. He seems to be, you know what? He rushes in less now. So like he doesn't rush in 5 or 6 steps. He'll rush in like 2 or 3 steps, right? I didn't see him rush in just completely stupidly against Dominic Reyes. I saw him rush in against Dominic Reyes, but he would kind of half rush in. He'll stop his beat a little bit before that. So I do think Yan has leveled up in regards to the striking, in regards to being clumsy and rushing in. And yeah, I just see this fight quite a number of times being very cagey. Both fighters will respect each other's power. Izzy will definitely respect Yan's power, but Yan will definitely respect Izzy's precision. And especially when them kicks, when Izzy's toes are whisking off Yan's nose a couple of times, which will happen, believe me that, Yan is going to be like, damn, this guy's dangerous. He's quick. He's fast. He's clever. He's timing me. Them toes, I don't want them toes anywhere near my nose. So, like, I think Yan's going to have more respect as the fight goes on. And I think Yan can keep it close enough in the striking as to where he might not feel the need to rush in, you know. I know that sounds kind of crazy to say, but I do respect Yan as a pretty solid technical striker, man. And I know people are going to be like, you know, Yan was like a Muay Thai champion before MMA. I mean, that's what Dana said the other day. I haven't fact-checked him. I didn't know that, but Dana said it the other day. And, you know, people disrespect Yan a lot. He always gets disrespected. And I think people are disrespecting Yan here, man. Look, I do think Izzy's he's a much higher level striker. I will say that. But, man, do not sleep on Yan because Yan has that equalizer with that power. And I think I think it's going to make Izzy very hesitant in this fight. You know, I really do. And look, as I say, I'm only giving this a 35% chance of happening. But the bookies are giving us 26%, man. So, like, I've got to take my shot here. And that's what I'm doing. I'm putting 1 unit on the plus 275 line of Israel Adesanya to win by decision. And, you know, I really can see this happening. Izzy's a decision fighter in the UFC, man. Like, I know a lot of people want to say Izzy's this crazy knockout king because he knocked out his last 2 opponents, Paulo Costa or he didn't knock out Yoel Romero. But, you know, he knocked out Robert Whittaker, which was a very popular or well-known fight. You know, that was his fight where he sort of rose to fame. It was sold out crowd in Australia. It was very huge on this side of the world where I am, New Zealand and Australia. And also it was huge in the UFC because, you know, it was Australia versus New Zealand. Robert Whittaker was a pretty dominant champion at the time. And, you know, Israel Adesanya was on the come up. So that was his big fight. And he knocked him out basically twice in that fight. And then obviously his Costa fight, I'd say the Robert Whittaker fight and the Costa fight were way more hyped than the Yoel Romero fight. And he actually got knockouts in both of them, right? And then the fights he didn't get knockouts in, the Yoel Romero and the Kelvin Gastelum fight, they was way less hyped. You know, I'm talking about pre-fight. There was way less hype. So I do think there's a little bit of a over-exaggeration on Izzy's power and Izzy's knockout ability, because I'll just bring up Izzy's record now. You know, I remember Izzy going fucking 5 rounds with Brad Tavares back in the day. And, you know, Brad Tavares, pretty tough guy, but we did see him get blasted in round 1 by Edmund Shabazian. But look, if we start this, if we talk about all his fights, right? He knocked out Rob Wilkinson. Then he went to a split decision with Marvin Vettori, right? 3 rounds. Then he went 5 rounds with Brad Tavares, you know. Then he knocked out Brunson in 1. But then he went to decision again against Anderson Silva. Then he went to decision again, 5 rounds, Kelvin Gastelum. You know, that was, to be honest, he definitely almost stopped that fight a couple of times. But it went to decision against Kelvin Gastelum, who's not as tough, in my opinion. He's a very tough guy, but not as tough as Yan. Yan is a big guy. Then he knocked out Robert Whittaker, but then he went to decision against Yoel Romero. I mean, look, I know Izzy's not got the super power, but Izzy's very technical and very proficient. And when you're that technical and when you have that good timing, sometimes it can kind of like offset the power. You don't need to have as much power because your timing is there. So, yeah, look, I just think the 35% chance of Izzy winning this fight by decision, that's not a stretch, in my opinion. It's somewhat of a likely outcome, and I'm happy to take the shot on the plus 275 line here. 1 unit I've put on it, and if it wins, I get 3.75 units back altogether, 2.75 units in profit. And I think that's a good line there. So that's the most inaccurate line that I see on the card. Israel Adesanya to win by decision at plus 275. You can probably get it at plus 300 at some places, and I know you get them funny books. I don't have access to these books, or I don't bet on these books. I don't tip these books, but you do have some books that has like Israel Adesanya by unanimous decision. That'll probably be up at like plus 340 or something. So I mean, that's even more value for your money, in my opinion. I doubt it's going to be a split decision or a majority decision, but you know, you always are running the risk when you bet them very super uber specific prop bets, especially when you got these dodgy judges out there. You know, you just got to think about the RDA versus Paul Felder fight. If you had an RDA by unanimous ticket in that fight, damn, you would be crying. You know, you'd be want to go and find that judge and fine that judge the money that he should have, that he basically took away from you. But that's the most inaccurate line. And now we're going to get onto the last section of the podcast, which is talking about the main event. But I've just spoke about the main event. So what I'm going to do for you guys instead is talk about the co-main event. And it's kind of funny. So we basically ended up talking about both co-main events, or we spoke about Piotr Yan, you know, versus Sterling. Then we've just talked about Izzy versus Yan. And now I'm going to talk about Megan Anderson versus Amanda Nunes. So the top 3 fights, the title fights I've ended up talking about purely by coincidence, really. You know, I just want to talk about the most exciting fight, the most inaccurate line. They just happen to be on the main and the co-main, or the co-main, whatever you want to call it. But I will talk a little bit. Look, I'm not going to spend too long on this fight because this fight, there's not too much to talk about. It's pretty rudimentary in my opinion, but I will talk about Megan Anderson versus Amanda Nunes in a minute, just after I have this little drink. So, Megan Anderson, Amanda Nunes, the people's main event. Not really, right? Look, yeah, I don't have much to say here, guys. Amanda Nunes should roll here. She's like minus 1,000 favorite. I guess she shouldn't be minus 1,000. Maybe she should be minus 900. I mean, I don't see a lot of path to victories for Megan Anderson here. Obviously, the path to victory is KO in round 1. Megan Anderson is a dangerous chick in round one. She's got that Muay Thai stance, and she is able to land on virtually every opponent she faces. She landed on Holly Holm before Holly Holm completely dominated her in that fight. And, you know, she looked to have Holly Holm a little bit flustered in that fight when she did land. So she has got big power. She's coming off 2 first-round KOs, I believe. She KO'd Norma Dumont, and then she KO'd, who was it? I can't remember her names. Begin with an F and surnames with a Z, right? Oh yeah, Zara Farn. I don't know how you say that name, but yeah, she stopped her via triangle choke. But you know, I just don't see many paths to victory for Megan Anderson, apart from the KO in round 1. And how likely is that going to happen? Amanda Nunes is not as much of a lunatic as she used to be. I don't think she's going to go in guns blazing. I do think she's going to understand that Megan Anderson has the reach, has the range, and she is a dangerous striker. Amanda did say herself that, you know, this is a good challenge for me because Megan Anderson has the reach and the range. So at least, you know, Nunes has slightly been doing her homework. She's not just had a baby recently and just completely, you know, she's double champ. She's had a baby. She don't care about fighting anymore. That's the only angle you can really make for a Megan Anderson win. And it doesn't seem like that. You know, she seemed very focused at the press conference the other day. You know, she said that she's going to keep defending her belt. So she obviously still wants to fight. She did mention a few things about Megan Anderson, about having the range and reach. So I'm pretty confident in saying that Nunes' head is still in the game. And, you know, it's funny because I'm talking about like all the stuff outside the octagon, because I'm just trying to make a case for like Anderson, because inside the octagon, apart from that KO round 1, man, I mean, what's she going to do? You know, listen, if this fight was a stand-up fight, I'd definitely be taking a poke at Megan Anderson. I do think that if Amanda Nunes catches one of them overhand rights, it's going to really hurt anybody in the world. Definitely Megan Anderson. You know, Megan Anderson, we haven't seen her, you know, in a back and forth striking fight too much because people, you know, like to take her down because she is dangerous on the feet. But I will say that, you know, if Amanda Nunes catches her, look, it could be lights out for anyone. So it definitely could be lights out for her. But basically, this fight comes down to the takedowns, right? You know, I haven't said it. I've been avoiding it a little bit. I wanted to get all the other stuff out of the way. But this is the elephant in the room, guys. This fight comes down to the takedowns, man. Amanda Nunes gets one takedown. Why should the fight not be over? Holly Holm took Megan Anderson down about 5 times in that fight. And every time she took her down, she was able to mount her and land hellacious ground and pound. Now, Holly's really not a stoppage fighter. She doesn't generate that much power. Sure, she's got solid head kicks, but Holly doesn't have much power in her body, in her frame in general, right? Amanda Nunes is an absolute beast. If you put Amanda Nunes in full mount over Megan Anderson, shit is going to be over by some ground and pound TKO elbows really heavily, you know. That is super highly likely. And then on the flip side of it, it is not unlikely, you know, for Megan Anderson to get taken down. Amanda Nunes land a couple of strikes. Megan Anderson turns around, gives her back. Amanda Nunes gets the first round rear naked choke. You know, she could even get a head and arm triangle. Holly Holm almost locked in a head and arm triangle against Megan Anderson. There's many path to victories for Amanda Nunes if this fights get to the ground. So, does Megan Anderson's takedown defense check out? No, it does not. It does not, guys. Yeah, she can defend a couple of takedowns, but man, Amanda Nunes will be able to get this fight to the ground. Amanda Nunes is not stupid. Amanda Nunes is not going to try and stand a bang with this girl. Look, she's did it against Cyborg, so maybe she will. But, you know, once she gets cracked a couple of times, Amanda, she will take this fight to the ground. She did it against GDR. She kept taking her to the ground because she knew that GDR was a little bit better stand-up than her. So she's a very clever fighter now. I don't think her ego is super high like she has to knock her out. But, yeah, I just feel like Amanda Nunes is going to take her down and probably stop her. And she's probably going to get a first-round stoppage, guys. You know, a lot of people are betting that over 1.5. I wouldn't be so quick to bet that over 1.5, man. Nunes is an absolute beast. I think Nunes will shoot a takedown in under 90 seconds. And once the fight gets to the ground, Nunes is going to finish the fight. Amanda Nunes inside the distance, minus 330 is probably value. And yeah, I can see that getting bet up, to be honest. I can see that being like damn near minus 450. by the time the fight goes off, because that's just what I think is going to happen. So that's it. I've spoke about the most exciting fight, Piotr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling. I'm predicting a Piotr Yan 4th round TKO. Not confident on that pick. Then I've spoke about the most inaccurate line, Israel Adesanya via decision. I'm predicting Israel Adesanya via decision, I guess, although I'm only giving it a 35% chance of happening. And then the main event, or the co-main, in this case, I'm talking about Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson, and I'm predicting Amanda Nunes by 1st round ground and pound. So that's it, guys. What I will do is catch up with the chat now for anyone who has joined in live. I appreciate you joining in live. But for those of you listening to the audio, this is it. And I'll be back next week, as always, for another breakdown of the card we have there. So thanks for listening to the Lucrative MMA Betting Podcast, and see you next week. So let me just go to the comments here. We've got Tio saying hi. What's up, Tio? Hey, good to see you, man. I hope you're well. Hope you're doing well, bro. LSU Tigers saying Izzy is minus 200, so there is value on his current line. Okay, I did see Izzy at minus 220 the last I checked, and it wasn't too long before I did this podcast. So maybe that was just on the book I was checking at, though. I didn't check more than one book. So let me just have a look now. Because if so, there is value. But, you know, what did I say? I think I said Izzy was like minus 2, should be about minus 233, right? So if he's minus 200, yeah, there's value, but it's not that much value. It was like a 4% or something. So, like, is there enough value to bet? It just depends what type of bettor you are, man. And I don't know, 4%, it's probably not enough for me to bet this specific fight because, as I said, I feel like anything can happen in this fight. And what am I saying? I'm saying that, you know, I'm already betting on Izzy by decision. So in that regard, I probably won't bet him. Israel Adesanya, well, but, you know, they don't update it like instantly. But on best fight odds, you know, I've got it up here. Israel Adesanya is, he's minus 210 best price, but, you know, he's minus 230 everywhere else. So there's no value on that. I mean, I don't think best fight odds update like by the second, but I do believe they update at least by the hour. So I'm not sure what book you have access to, but that's solid. Ayub Ali is saying, what's the most money you've made off a UFC bet and what fight was it? I don't know, man. What's the most money I've made? So I don't know. To be honest, and I shouldn't be saying this because this is bad advice, but to be honest, the most money I've probably made is like from like a parlay. Because, you know, sometimes I do these crazy parlays, not often anymore, but I have an account where I do little bullshit bets. So like I have my main bankroll, you know, where I put, you know, where I bet properly, professionally, where I make most of my money. But then I'll do like crazy parlays, like 3-leg parlays, this fighter to win in round 1, this fighter to win by decision, and this fighter to win by, you know, round 3. It's like plus 600, plus 500, plus 400, all in a parlay. You put $50 on and it returns like 20,000. And, you know, I've cashed a couple of them a couple of times. I remember cashing like 7,000 on a long shot parlay when Frankie Edgar fought Chan Sung Jung. I remember cashing there. I also cashed on a single bet. I cashed quite a lot at the time. I cashed like $2,000, I think, on McGregor to be Aldo because I put like 500 pounds on him, English pounds, which is like probably like $800 back then because it's like 5-6 years ago. And you know, I also had him in a couple of parlays, so you know, I won quite a lot of money on that, and that was just like on one fight. But yeah, I don't know exactly, but I have had a couple of them long shot parlays hit and I cashed like around 10 grand a couple of times. But look, that will hardly ever happen. You'll probably spend more money in the long run betting on them things to happen than you will actually make winning back from them crazy long shot parlay bets. You won't win long term in parlays of people legs more than 2 legs. I've been talking for way too long now, guys. Can't even speak properly. What I meant to say was, you won't win long term if you're doing parlays like that. So stick to your straight bets, stick to your 2-legger parlays, stick to your good value prop bets, and you'll make money in the long term. But for fun, sometimes, I like to do that with a little bit of money. Shawnee Mac saying, who was the fighter you said was minus 140 when you placed? And Shawnee, that is for me and members to know and you to find out if you sign up on the website, bro. That's what you sign up for, because you can get them minus 140s when they're like minus 230 now. Ryan Diamond saying evening, bro. Evening to you too. Yeah, man. I guess that's it then. The chat's done. So I'm going to hop off here now. I hope you've enjoyed the content I brought out. And I can't wait for these fights, guys, man. It's going to be huge. I've got so many units on the line. Anybody watching who still wants to sign up, you can sign up at lucrativemmabetting.com. It's easy to find my website, and you can cash with me tomorrow at UFC 259. As I said, I've got a whole heap of bets on the line, and I do have a members section where you get access to not only my betting tips, where we have all the current betting tips, but also you get access to sports betting training courses. So on there, I have I have training courses for beginners, and I also have like sports betting fundamentals course where I go through the concept of value and how to find good lines and all of that good stuff. So you can find me on there, and I will be putting out my free bet video as well after this video, and I'll be back next week for the podcast. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.